From a growth standpoint, they have the largest amount of room to run of any of the companies on this list.
It's an industry that's growing, but still far from fully taking off.
They're building a moat. The rest of them are still building their reactor.
MarketBeat's Jeffrey Neal Johnson breaks down the winners in the race to fully integrate nuclear energy across America.
They're the only vertically integrated player that's also involved in refining uranium.
Will you agree with his take on today's nuclear leaders? Let's dive in. Jeffrey, so great to have you back on the show talking about one of your favorite sectors, and that's nuclear energy. This has been a topic we've been talking about on the channel for a whole year now, but there's still a lot of exciting moves happening in nuclear right now. Talk about why investors should really be looking at this area.
The electrification of everything is just beginning. The energy sector has been in the news for the AI demand, but that's the shiny outside of it. You still have the electrification of cars, trains, boats, planes, every single thing in your home, every single thing that you use. Electricity is becoming the number one way to dispense energy. So all energy producers are moving towards electricity, whether it's coal, hydrogen, nuclear. They all are finding the closest way to get to converting to electricity. And nuclear is the best, most efficient way to do that. It's the biggest bang for your buck. It provides the best baseload energy for AI. It provides the solution to the aging infrastructure problem through small modular reactors. It provides long-term power with small fuel requirements, with quick deployment that's easy to manage. And it's a situation where we're finally getting past, as a nation, energy regulators being afraid to move forward with nuclear power because of incidents like the 3 Mile Island meltdown, et cetera. Those incidents were heavily ingrained in the psyche of the nation. And so everyone that was alive when that happened kind of sees that as the biggest thing that could ever happen to the nuclear sector. And everybody just kind of shut the sector down, stop bothering with it, build more coal plants, and let's not take that risk. But since then, the technology has advanced to the point where even with small modular reactors, they all run on AI. It's very manageable. Like the small modular reactor systems, they're almost, the way they're designed, it's almost impossible for them to melt down. When you need power at a data center that might not get connected to the grid for 10 or 15 years, small modular reactors are the best way to go. And when you have all of that power dragging off of the aging infrastructure, the resurgence of nuclear is the only way to go to generate the base load that we need.
Yeah, AI definitely seems to have gotten the nation over its fear of nuclear and now getting all this demand because it really is such a great solution to the need to build out these data centers and build out AI across the country. So we've been talking a lot about AI infrastructure, and nuclear is definitely a piece of that puzzle. Today, you have 5 nuclear stocks for us that are really helping to power the AI build out across the country. So let's get to that first stock on your list.
So the first stock on my list is going to be Cameco, and they're the most reliable Western producer of uranium. They produce the uranium that is used in about 90% of the reactors that are Western. They're the only vertically integrated player that's also involved in refining uranium. So if you just have a uranium miner, then you've got to find a refiner, and that's kind of a difficult hurdle to overcome.
The 90% market share seems like a pretty huge advantage for this company. Are there any competitors coming on the market, or are they still really the one and only strong leader in this field?
The biggest thing about them is that they're Western based. A lot of the other refiners and miners are in Russia and Ukraine and in places that are geopolitically unstable or geopolitically inaccessible. So having Cameco as a Western refiner and miner is kind of a big deal. On top of the fact they have an enormous stockpile of uranium to help mitigate any fluctuations in uranium pricing.
Absolutely a leader in the uranium mining field, a great first company to talk about in this nuclear race. The rest of your list has a lot of great nuclear companies, but if you're an investor interested in energy in general, check out our latest free premium article on marketbeat.com. It's a list of 5 clean energy stocks poised for the next green rally. This is a really interesting list. It has some names you might not have seen before, or maybe you haven't looked at in a while. You can scan the QR code now or click the link in the description of this video to get that report for free right now on marketbeat.com. All right, Jeffrey, let's move on to the second company on your list of nuclear leaders right now.
So the next one on the list is BWX Technologies, which market symbol is BWXT. Okay, and you know that I love a good pick and shovel play. And BWX, they are that pick and shovel play. Okay, they have government contracts that back them from the Navy to produce nuclear reactors for submarines and for large vessels like aircraft carriers. And they're perfecting the fuel that small modular reactors use. Okay, so they use a different kind of fuel from big reactors that, for instance, your energy provider uses. That fuel is different and it has to be refined from the yellow cake uranium, for instance, that Cameco sells. So they're buying yellow cake uranium from a provider like Cameco. They're refining it into this halo fuel that is then being sold to small modular reactor builders like, for instance, NuScale, and they're also selling them the valves and the sensors and the other pieces that they're going to need to build these small modular reactors and get them certified, etc.
I like to see some plays like this that aren't the names that everyone might associate with nuclear. Those more picks and shovels plays are very interesting. Also curious, kind of the same question as the first stock. Is there other competitors doing similar things that are specifically working to service these small modular nuclear reactors? Or are they kind of niche in that market?
They're pretty niche in that market. The nuclear industry is extremely regulated. So in order to get a part, piece, bobble, bit into service, it's got to be analyzed. It's got to be proven to be safe, go through all this rigorous testing and all this certification process. And that takes a lot of money. Once one company gets a piece certified, it creates a moat for all the other companies. They don't really want to go through the hurdle of getting that part certified because then they have to compete. It's just easier to move on to the next part or to just sell their little business to BWX, which is like a big part of their expansion strategy. They buy other companies that have certified parts to implement into their catalog.
All right, an interesting picks and shovels play for your second stock on this list. Let's move on to the third company you have for us today.
So let's look at the largest producer of nuclear energy, and that is Constellation Energy. Constellation Energy Group produces and provides the largest nuclear footprint. So they put out the most nuclear-based energy, and they're on track to increase the amount of nuclear energy that they can provide and scale that up. So they are the ones that are ahead of the game as far as owning the most reactors and producing the most nuclear-based power.
Now, this is definitely a name a lot of investors who've been interested in nuclear have heard before. The question is, compared to the other names on this list, is there a lot of growth potential with a company this large already? Or is this one going to be maybe a slower and steadier growth story?
Actually, there is quite a bit of growth potential for them. They're a profit machine today, okay? They're already 30% up on the year. They have a 21% return on equity. They have a massive cash flow generating machine going. And I think that as more and more energy demand comes online, they, of course, will be there to provide that because you're not going to have a Microsoft or a Google buying power from like a small regional player. They're going to strategically locate their facilities near energy grid providers like Constellation. So I think that Constellation does have quite a bit of room to run because there are so many places that are going to need big power like brought to them. And the only way to make that big power is going to be through the expansion of nuclear.
All right, very good. It's a name that you have to talk about in any conversation on nuclear. Constellation Energy is definitely a clear leader here. Let's move on to another name, not the big major producers, but a different name that you may have heard of in nuclear before for your fourth pick on this list.
Fourth player on the list is NuScale, which is the small modular reactor provider. They've already got a plan approved. They've already got a reactor, a small modular reactor approved. And I believe that from a growth standpoint, they have the largest amount of room to run of any of the companies on this list. And the reason that I believe that is NuScale provides these small modular reactors that are about the size of a shipping container that they can produce about as much electricity as needed for a large data center project. The infrastructure that is currently spread throughout the United States is not capable of handling the electrification of everything. So, as AI, everything, electric cars, electric boats, electric planes, everything needs to be charged, everything gets plugged into a wall, starts happening, you're going to start seeing small towns that grow bigger that are growth constrained because they can't get electricity. And so the easiest way to fix that problem isn't to replace all of their power lines from the city back to the grid. It's just to bring in a truck mounted nuclear powered generator and just set it right on the outskirts of town and plug it right into the town and feed it right there. And then it also provides the ability for that small reactor to back feed into the infrastructure, providing a little bit more stability when the draw on the town isn't so strong.
Yeah, this feels like this would really speed up the development, the commercialization of nuclear energy across the country. So instead of building massive Constellation Energy size plants all over the US, you are just taking these and kind of taking off on that concept. So it's a really interesting way to look at these as small generators going to AI data centers all over the country. I think the way that you phrase that makes it make a lot more sense for investors who are just kind of learning about this new technology. Now, with NuScale specifically, they're not the only small nuclear reactor people out there, right? There's other competition in this field.
There is competition, but just like with BWX Technologies, the first person to get certified, the first plan to get certified, the first person to stick a nuclear reactor on the ground and start collecting safety data, that's the one that starts building the moat. They're building a moat. The rest of them are still building their reactors.
Is NuScale commercial already? Do they already have these in operation, or are they still in the development stage?
So they're the first company to have a certification from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which means that they're the first one to get regulatory commission approval, unless one of their competitors really steps up their game and throws a reactor on the ground before they can get one on the ground. They're going to have the first mover advantage.
Normally, when we talk about nuclear stocks, we do talk about one of NuScale's competitors, and that's Oklo. It's not on your list today. So I want to make sure we address that. Why is that one not on your list? Do you think that they're not going to get the same kind of advantage that NuScale is?
There's so much room in the market for both competitors, but I think that NuScale is ahead of Oklo. Certainly, if I could have done a show about small modular nuclear reactors and included 5 or 6 small modular nuclear reactors, they would have been number 2 on the list. But I think that NuScale is a little bit further ahead with their NRC approval already. And I think that they will have a nuclear reactor on the ground before Oklo will, but they don't have a market yet. So you could have a situation where NuScale specializes in providing AI data centers with small modular reactors, and then Oklo specializes in integrating them on the edge of towns to make sure that these towns have, the energy that they need. There's so much room when you start talking about converting legacy energy and also converting um, the green energy.
Yeah, there's so many names out there that could see a lot of growth in nuclear. So thanks for going down that rabbit hole a little bit of all the different names out there. And there's a lot of space for many nuclear companies to see a lot of growth over the next few years as this is really getting integrated and commercialized across the country. So this last pick is a good one for investors who are going, which names do we even look at right now? Because there's so many to look at.
The next one on my list is the Sprout Uranium Miners ETF, which is URNM. This one, I really like it because it has, of course, a diversified basket of miners, which is great. But the reason that I like it the most is the diversification of the fund. You have the diversified basket of miners that you're investing in. A large portion of the fund is dedicated to the Sprout Uranium Miners Trust, which is physical uranium. So now with one fund, you're buying into a large diversified basket of the actual miners, and you're also buying into the uranium stockpile, owning physical uranium as part of the investment. And that gives you, if for instance, the uranium spot price is suddenly going to go through the roof, you're going to be able to see that action on one side of the ETF. And of course, because most of these miners also hold uranium stockpiles, as they take off as well, it will just sort of push the entire fund up. And I think it's a much better leverage play than just like a miners fund or a uranium fund. This mixed fund is very it's a very good fund.
Yeah, I like to see an ETF on the list because it's a lot of investors do prefer looking at that rather than individual stocks. My last question to wrap this up is just with all the development happening in nuclear, these uranium miners, this is not something that's going to go away, right? That's a question I've had in all of the new development happening are will researchers and developers be able to find a way around these natural resources so they don't have to have them as a part of the equation? Do you ever see that happening as part of the nuclear story, or will uranium always be a part of this stock story?
I think that uranium will always be part of the stock story. There are other forms that they can use, like therium and cesium, that they can use to build reactors, but those are all theoretical situations. They are finding ways to create, for instance, like this HALEU fuel, which is more stable, creating like a molten salt fuel that's more stable. I think that with the world, the fear is like you're going to have a baseball sized wad of uranium melt down and destroy the entire world. And that's a founded fear from a long time ago. But if you look at the fact that we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of nuclear powered submarines, nuclear powered ships, which is a perfect example of a small modular reactor, and none of those have ever melted down. And then since 3 Mile Island, and since the way that they've changed in the building of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, you haven't had any major nuclear incidents here either. I mean, the closest thing that we've had is the Japanese incident, and it took a generational tsunami to make that happen. So the fuel, it gets a bad rap. Even if they move to a different fuel like therium or cesium, you're always going to need uranium. It is the workhorse. We have the biggest stockpile of it. It would take so long for the other fuels to catch up, and it would take so long for those theoretical reactors to pass the sniff test that uranium has passed over the past 50 years.
A really interesting conversation. You are a wealth of information, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for sharing some of this background on the nuclear story and where investors should be looking right now. I'd love to hear from you. Which nuclear companies are you most excited about? What do you think of Jeffrey's comparison of NuScale versus Oklo? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. And as always, happy investing.